Hello everyone, my name is Matthew, and on behalf of the organisers, Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you all to the latest Festival of BIM and Digital Construction webinar. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of our sponsors, but with special mention of FlowForma, our sponsor for today's session. First, we'll be kicking things off with a panel discussion on thriving, not just surviving, the new normal. Why digitising is the answer. Before I introduce our speakers, just a reminder that if you do have any questions for them, you can submit your questions in the questions box on your screen. If we do run out of time for questions, we'll send any unanswered ones to them after the session. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Paul Stone from FlowForma.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm a product strategist at FlowForma. So I'm responsible for designing the product and aligning the product with their user needs across the world. That's me.
Perfect, thank you, Paul. So next we're also joined by Chris Henry.
Hi, my name's Chris. I'm a consultant at iShango, and part of my role involves implementing and deploying FlowForma for clients on various projects in the construction industry.
Perfect, and finally we also have Paula Lemon with us.
Hi, I'm Paula Lemon. I'm the Director of Project Controls at Maverick Construction. I've been with the company since February of this year. I primarily work in the telecom division, and currently we're doing 5G networks in a couple of the states in the US. My background is in telecom. I have 20 years of experience, so this is a really great fit for me. Our corporate office is in Boston. However, I sit outside of Houston, Texas currently. Hello, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us and to our speakers as well. So to start the panel discussion, I think it'd be good to look at how has process automation empowered your distributed workforce and transformed your business. So Paul, do you want to start by explaining how you've seen this so far in your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. What we're noting is like a big change, a big shift in construction to move towards digitization. And people are looking to digitize processes as a way to improve productivity. And we're seeing it from all angles. So it's great to have two people on board today who are from two very different scenarios, two very different companies, but both dealing with digitization and construction using the same techniques. So maybe first I could ask Paula a little bit, who is Maverick Construction and what are you achieving with digital automation in your business?
Well, we're doing really great things. We're working on some 5G construction projects which were highly paper intensive and laborious through the approval processes. So we've actually automated our field production reporting through FlowForma, and it's going with great success. We've got a lot of people that work out in the field that can't get back to an office. It goes through several stages of approval processes. You can see the pictures, you can see the maps. All you have to do is log in the morning, check to see what's in your queue, you approve it, reject it, add your notes and comments, and then they've moved on to whatever comes next. So it's really saving a lot of time for our own employees. Our subcontractors are getting paid faster because the process is no longer paper, and we're getting high praise from using it and making everybody's really their day-to-day life much easier and much more productive.
That's great to hear, and it's great to hear that you're moving to a more paperless environment. The A14 was a very different thing altogether. It's a very large civil construction project in the UK. Maybe Chris, if you could fill us in a bit more detail about what the A14 project was and is, and how it's benefiting from digital automation.
Yeah, sure. So the A14 is a £1.5 billion road infrastructure project, the biggest in the UK. And it's spread over 27 kilometres and a mixture of greenfield, new roads and widening existing roads. It's 3 joint venture partners as well as the client and obviously all the supply chain. So one of the biggest issues we had early on was getting everyone on one process. The governance was really an issue. Having 3 JV partners, people just use different processes all the time, depending on what the parent company was. And then we got FlowForma in, so we were sure that when people were out in the field using the mobile app or filling in something in the office, it was the right form, the most up-to-date process, because obviously we updated stuff, and the link they use is the same link as before, so they're always using the most up-to-date form. So governance is always spot on, and then if there is any issue, so the client queries anything, or commercial team, for example, then we've got everything to hand and we know everything's sorted.
That's great. So it's really making a difference, I guess, from moving from previous paper-based systems to an electronic system that's kind of tracking all the workflow, capturing all that data, storing it in the background. And yeah, it must have made a big difference on what is a very, very large project. So I think now we're probably ready to move on to our next slide, Matthew.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. So next, we're going to look at how has digitizing processes helped you prepare for a post-COVID world. So again, Paul, do you want to start by explaining what you've seen in this area so far?
Yeah, well, it varies across industries. Within construction, what we find is that some construction companies, COVID has had very little impact. Some construction companies, it's been much higher, to the point where everybody's gone on furlough and operations have shut down. So it really varies. And the interesting point with digital processes is that they most apply, I guess, in the middle, where basically you have workers who temporarily go off-site and come back on, or you have new COVID restrictions in place that require people to fill in forms to notify people of symptoms, or where they have to go into quarantine, that kind of thing. So it really varies between construction companies. And I guess on that note, maybe Paul, you could talk a little bit about has COVID had any impact on your workforce?
Yes, actually, timing wise for us, this really worked out well. A lot of the our customer offices and our site offices were restricted by how many employees could be inside the building at the same time during different hours and that kind of stuff. But because they had their iPads and they could access FlowForma remotely, we continued on without a glitch, which was amazing, because that's not the case for a lot of people, where you actually had to go into an office, sign off on a paper, hand something in, scan pictures or maps or whatever. This worked really well for us. So I guess unfortunately or fortunately, the timing for us worked well.
That's great. I guess, Chris, with the A14, the project had been in progress for a long time before COVID hit. But I suppose the work that was done to help remove paper from the organization and so on, up from the project, would have helped, in terms of the impact that COVID had on operations.
Yeah, definitely. And whereas before the requisition system, for example, you would have had to have a signature on a piece of paper. Now we add the digital requisition system. You could be anywhere in the world and approve a requisition with your phone or on your laptop. So the requisitions weren't stopped. You could approve permit to digs, review the drawings, etc., all remotely. So because we're such a key infrastructure project, we had to carry on, but do it safely. And with reducing the amount of people at site, we didn't stop the job going on. And as you mentioned, there was no paper, so obviously we don't want to pass paper from people to people, so we reduced that and got it right down. And one of the first processes after COVID hit was a COVID inspection form and contact tracing, which allowed us to collect a lot of data on people who'd been in touch with who, and then have an almost live report rather than having to collect it daily or weekly. We could just have a live report that just updated itself.
Well, that is a great thing about digital processes, in that you're gathering information all the time. So, where you had paper in the past, you'd have to rekey that detail into a system somewhere before you could report on it. But of course, with digital processes, the data is already there straight away, and you can get live dashboards on that detail, and you can manage all the activity within the organization very quickly, and see bottlenecks and see delays before they have a big impact. So yeah, of course, in a COVID scenario, that makes a big difference too, because you can use, as you say, contact tracing to identify where there's clusters of people who are coming down with symptoms, that kind of stuff. So yeah, absolutely, I can see that making a big difference, especially on a large site like the A14.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's been
so
useful, very useful.
Yeah, so again, thank you everyone for sharing. So now it'd be really good to look at how bringing processes online is actually easier than people think. So it'd be good if each of you could share your top tips for becoming digitized. So again, Paul, do you want to just start and share what advice you would give to people?
Yeah, absolutely. So FlowForma is what's known as a no-code tool. Now, what that means is that basically it allows business people to actually configure solutions themselves. And Chris will have mentioned this before. It's basically a system where you're not so dependent on IT people or external vendors or providers. You go and you do it yourself. And the thing about that is if you take the initiative, do it yourself, you'll find that you get results a whole lot faster. So what I'd say is that, get going, get started, and then you can basically appoint a champion or find a champion within your project or within your organization who's prepared to promote the whole idea of do-it-yourself IT, basically, and get people going, get that snowball rolling. And what you'll find is that you'll get results quickly. And that really makes a difference because people see those results coming quickly and it becomes viral within the organization. And one person tries it, one person gets success, the next person wants to do the same. So I guess my tip would be find that champion to promote the whole idea within your business and then get started. And the other thing I'll just quickly throw in is that we actually have a program called Sure Start that actually helps you get started. So Sure Start is all about training you up, but at the same time helping you to deliver that first digital process in your business to get that snowball rolling. So, our Sure Start program has been really successful, and I know Paul has been through it there recently, but it helps people basically get going and get up and running. So they'd be my main tips. So maybe Paula, would you have any tips you might like to give?
I think I have two main ones I have to say, is that when you're building out your FlowForma process, know your process, know how it's supposed to work, who it's going to touch, how it's going to go through to the next step. That makes it easier to build and much faster to build it out. Whereas if you have to start and stop because you're not sure what your initial process is. So know your business and know the process that you want to build out initially. My second one would be to know your users. Build it to how they want to see it, how it's going to look for them. Is it easier to type things in? Is it easier to hit a checkbox? Is it easier for them to see a drop-down list? Do they want the electronic signature in, or those types of things? Know who you're building it for, because again, it's a win for everybody at that point. So I'd have to say those are my two key points.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen a lot of success in construction in particular with the ability to kind of quickly change things around. So, you can basically build yourself a prototype based on your process, get it out there in the hands of the people that are going to use it in the field, and then you know what, they might come back to you and say, oh, actually, signature isn't going to work there, or this little change needs to be made. That's going to make all the difference in terms of adoption.
I agree, because you're not waiting around for change orders to move a field or change how it looks or put it on a second sheet. Within minutes, you can log in, make that change, and then it's out there refreshed and you're good to go forward. So that is super helpful, because we know, God bless all the IT people because they have their role, but there are times when you need a quick change and not something that's going to have to go through a work approval process and take 2 weeks to get implemented. So it's very helpful that way, because a lot of it, once you start using it, is just those little tweaks to make it better for the user.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really appreciated by those end users. They see that you're being responsive, you're making the little changes that they ask for, really quickly. And
You
that
get more
helps
buy-in that way too.
so much more buy-in, so much more kind of ownership and, and so much more adoption. And adoption is the key thing, because that's where you're saving the money. So
I agree.
yeah. So Chris, I was wondering, would you have any ideas in terms of your guidelines, or how how basically digitizing processes is easy for construction?
Yes, I definitely echo what Paula said about knowing your process, and definitely know FlowForma as a product, because I found that if someone would come, they want a process digitized, but they maybe take it up to a certain point, whereas knowing FlowForma, we could take it way past that point. So whereas they might say, yeah, I want this process digitizing, I want some emails, and I want a document generated. Yeah, fine, we can do that. But we can also collect all this data as well, and we can also start tracking, you know, who's doing what inspections, where your big issues are, and then also in terms of actual development, sometimes we could have a process out for testing within a day or two. And part of the reason was, as we grew our processes, we could just tap in to data sources without having to rebuild them. So say delivery locations, approvers, cost codes, we just linked back to the same database. So we weren't rebuilding it every time, and it got deployed so fast, and any feedback, we could incorporate it. We could constantly just adapt and improve the process. So the people who were using it, they knew it were an iterative process, and they knew it was just going to get better all the time and quickly.
Yeah, I think having that flexibility really helps. It's not just like we talked about it in terms of, you know, getting the system adopted, but like say, having the ability to change over time. As your business changes, as the environment changes, you can quickly change that process and add in fields, let's say, or add in documents or whatever communications. So it's a great thing to be able to do that. Yeah. So I think we're ready for our next slide there.
Perfect. I think before we come on to the questions we received from the audience, it'd be good to close out the panel by looking at how each of you have removed paper processes to drive productivity and profitability. So again, Paul, do you want to share your advice, your experiences, what you found when doing this?
Yeah, I think in general, the success across our client base, not just in construction, in terms of removing paper has been dramatic. For example, we have a hospital here in Ireland who 3,000 staff, and they cut 900,000 pieces of paper out of the organization. They essentially went paperless, and that's really powerful in terms of the message, in terms of sustainability, obviously, but in terms of cost as well. Paper is expensive to manage, and you know, 200,000 of those pieces of paper were going in envelopes, having stamps on them, etc. There's a massive cost saving. So I think you know, going paperless is a really worthwhile objective, and with FlowForma, with digitization, it can be achieved, and there are real benefits just in that alone. And that's aside from all the other benefits of improved efficiency and ultimately, of course, the very valuable message of collecting all that data that you can use for report to drive your decisions. So yeah, that would be my main point here. So maybe Chris, maybe if you could give me your thoughts on how removing paper would drive productivity in the A14.
Yeah, we've had a few processes which have made a massive difference. The biggest two, requisition system and smart permit to dig. So smart permit to dig, you're talking, I think about 20,000 permits got produced. Minimum 4 pages of A4 paper plus drawings. That's now gone, so it's all digital. Approvals all digital, and there's also a report which comes out of the back of it, so you can even track what time of day permits are being raised, approved, etc. You know, is there someone with too many permits open? And we couldn't do that with a paper system. The requisition system, I think there's about £4 million of requisitions have gone through that, and over 10,000 line items, which we can now go through every one and say the exact cost code and the person who used it, whether it's a company or a subcontractor. And even now we're developing quality forms. So we've taken 30 processes, 30 forms, and condensed it into one FlowForma form, which the user selects the inspection type, and it brings up a separate question set and collects all that data, and it'll be right into I think 30 different database tables, all automatically. So we're saving loads of time there collecting that data, which, as its quality, is obviously key if there's any issues. So we need to prove that we're inspecting stuff, and we're going to have all that data to hand straight away.
That's great, Chris. How about you, Paula? In terms of like driving productivity and profitability in the organization, is digitization making a difference?
Oh, absolutely. And we're, for the field production reporting that we're using on both our projects, you know, it's kind of twofold, because we get the data in, it goes through the QA/QC process through FlowForma, and then from there, we work it into our accounts payable process. So our subcontractors are paid timely, and they know it's flowing through the system. No, there's no lost paper. There's no, I didn't get back to my desk, or somebody's out of the office, you know, so it's got to sit there. by being able to reassign things, all of that data is flowing through, and in the end, our subcontractors are being paid significantly faster than they would using paper. And then on the other side, obviously, we're getting our QC done faster. We're not chasing paper anymore. It's all right there in a queue. When it goes through that process, we're able to bill our client. So, we've gone from taking a week to 2 weeks for paper to go through to days to being able to invoice our customer. So, and cash is king. So,
Yeah.
huge improvements and positive feedback from our customers in that process as well. So, again, twofold for us.
That's great to hear. It's kind of benefiting everybody.
Yes,
It's funny
yes.
that we wouldn't actually normally think about the fact that digitalization is benefiting the employees. It is absolutely benefiting the employees. They're getting paid
Yes,
faster.
yeah,
They're
it
not very,
is. And, when we've got happy subcontractors, they're getting their cash in. So
yeah,
that got their buy-in because our subcontractors also access FlowForma. So, there was no buy-in there. They jumped in.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it worked out really well for that as well. So,
yeah. That's
yeah,
great.
so it was a triple play, our employees, our subcontractors, and our customers.
Mm. Yeah, we're actually building in features into the system. They're there today that allow, external parties to be involved in processes. You can have a customer or a contractor or supplier, participate in your process just like they were an internal employee.
Yes,
So I think that's a key thing that's happening in construct. When we go to construction customers, that's one of the most attractive parts of the system, that you can actually include those external entities
I agree.
inside your
I agree.
process.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So now we have a presentation from Paul, who will be looking at the FlowForma process automation tool and providing a demo as well. So I'll just hand over to you, Paul, now.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to give you a quick demonstration of the system. First thing to say, I guess, is talk a little bit about the FlowForma application. It's an application that installs inside your SharePoint environment, and it stores all the data about the workflow and all the data that you capture in forms and all the documents associated with the workflow inside SharePoint. So it's all securely stored inside your infrastructure, your SharePoint infrastructure. When you want to launch a process, you click on a link inside a website. So here I am in a browser, going onto my demo construction website, and I can click on these links here to launch processes. So let's launch a materials requisition here by just clicking on that link. And what happens is the system goes away and opens up a form. Now, a form in FlowForma terms is not just a form that has data on it. It's not exactly like a paper form. What it does is it has several components inside it, and it includes workflow. That's the execution of steps in a process to achieve a business goal. In this case, it's a materials requisition workflow. In fact, it's based on one that Chris from the A14 built during that project. Here we can see the different steps in the process. First of all, the requester raises a request, then it goes for operational approval, commercial approval, buyer's queue, etc. So as the workflow progresses, this simple step bar on the top changes. So the highlighted step moves on, and each of these steps is assigned to a resource. So the resource can be a person or it can be a group of people, and only that assigned resource can carry out the work. So only the operations approver can do the approval, and so on. As the workflow progresses, these steps can change as well. So most people will be familiar with business processes, and they know that business processes branch off in different directions depending on the data that's captured during the process. And FlowForma does that too. But for the business end user, what the business user sees is that these steps change. So as you enter in data and as the workflow branches, the steps on the top here change so that the end user can always see where they are in the process right now, what's happened in the past, and what's most likely to happen in the future. Of course, as the workflow progresses, you're capturing more data. It might branch again, and the steps are constantly changing based on the data that you're entering. And about that data, well, it's captured in electronic form that's shown in the bottom area of the screen. Now this form contains data that's relevant to the current step. So as you move through the steps in the process, the data changes. And the data that's captured can be really varied. So for example, you can capture information in drop downs, for example, and then based on that data that you select, things happen. So in this case, it automatically identified that the operational approver for section 2 was Paul Stone, and indeed the commercial approver was also coincidentally Paul Stone. And as you enter in that data and select different options, the screen can change, so it will show different data for you. And also the workflow can change, so different steps are shown, and those steps can be reassigned to different people. So the operation approver can be different for section 2 and section 3 and section 4 and so on. So the system is very dynamic. The whole idea with it is it presents an electronic form to you that's relevant to the current step, that's relevant to you right now. And that electronic form is kind of automatic, so that as you select and enter data, things happen that help you fill in the form. The whole idea is to make it as easy as possible for the end user to fill in the form, pre-populate it where possible, and just get that data recorded so the step is completed and the workflow moves on. The system supports a wide range of data, including tabular information. So I can select a category here, and then automatically then it will display the aggregate types that I select for this purchase rec, or some materials rec. I can add in another item and so on, and it will automatically calculate information and pre-populate information. So here it's automatically populated the unit price based on the aggregate I selected. When I type in a quantity, it automatically calculates it and so on. So it's very dynamic, and as I say, it's all about helping the end user fill in that form, get it done as quickly as possible. And the system also handles document management. So you can upload documents. Those documents are saved in SharePoint, and they're automatically then tracked securely in SharePoint and so on. So the system has a wide array of kind of data that you can capture, and also the forms that you create are available on mobile. If I jump over here to a mobile view of a form, again, you have the step bar. Now this form is much simpler than the materials rec, but you can put the materials rec on here just as easily. And you'll have a same kind of view of a form. So you have a step bar at the top showing you the workflow. And then down here you have a question that you enter, and you notice that the system automatically lays out that form for a mobile device. So the form that you see in the desktop is immediately available on mobile devices via our mobile app, and that mobile app automatically lays out the form for a mobile device and a touch-sensitive screen. So for example, labels are placed above the fields so that it will fit on a narrower frame, so you can use it on a mobile phone, for example. Our mobile app, by the way, is available for Android and iOS devices. It works on tablets, it works on mobile phones, and as I say, the form automatically adjusts to fit well on your mobile screen. And we even include different types of data that are relevant to mobile devices. So for example, you can capture GPS location. When you upload a file, you can select a file just like you would on the desktop, but you can also take a picture with your mobile device and upload that picture onto your form here. We also provide fields for things like wet signatures, so that people can sign forms while they're out in the field. And all of this data is saved on your mobile device and synchronized up onto SharePoint automatically. Now, if you're not connected, let's say you lose your internet connection while you're out in site, the data can be cached and saved in your local device and then just synchronized when you have connectivity again. So you can use the forms offline. So important in a construction environment. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you what the system is like to configure, because these forms, it's a very nice, clean user interface that's easy to adopt by people who are used to using paper. That's the whole idea here. But you know what? Somebody has to build this form. So how does that happen? Well, you might remember earlier on in the presentation, we talked about how the system is no code and how that anybody can build a form. So I'm just going to quickly show you what that means. I'm going to jump over here, this one, and I'm going to show you a simpler form. So this one here is going to be a field change request. And the field change request is again a process that when I open it, first of all, you notice it's very similar to the last one in that we have a step bar here showing you the steps, and then we have some data that you're going to enter in below. And each of these steps has different sets of data. So as I enter in the information, I'm going to just upload a file here. And as I press OK and it uploads into SharePoint, I then submit and it moves on to the next logical step in the process. So when I press submit here, it will move on to classify FCR, which is the next logical step. So that's the way the form is working from an end user perspective. And as you can see, the data presented there is simply classified as a major or a minor FCR based on the information that was provided earlier on, and so on. Now I'm going to show you what that process looks like in a configuration tool. Let me quit out of this, jump over to look at an existing process definition, and have a look at the field change request workflow. So this is our tool. It's called a Flow Designer, and it helps you design your processes. So what it does is it shows you all the steps in the process. So raise FCR, classify the FCR, and then it goes for a couple of approvals. And those approvals operate in parallel so that the site engineer and the client approval can happen at different times, but at the same time, if you know what I mean. So the site engineer can do it first, or the client can do it first, whichever order, it doesn't matter. Both of them have to approve before it moves on then to answering the FCR and then validating the FCR. So these are all the steps of the process, and inside each step, you'll have the items of information that need to be captured. First of all, you have something called instructions. What that is simply a block of text that appears in the form that says this is what you've got to do next. And those instructions you can make them very specific. And having the ability to include instructions and messages on the form is so important when it comes to adoption because it makes training a whole lot easier. And then you have some questions. Now, these questions are pieces of data that need to be captured on that step. So this one here is please upload your design document. And what a question looks like is this. The whole system is configured by filling in forms just like this one. So I've typed in a question title, please upload your design document. I specified the type of question it's going to be a file upload. What that means is the answer to that question is going to be a file that people upload. It could just as well be a date or time or whatever. And then you can enter in some help text and enter in some data about where that document is going to land. Let me show this to you now by creating a brand new step in this process just to show you how easy it is. So let's say I want to have an approval of the FCR step that happens straight after it's raised. So what I'm going to do is first of all create that new process step. I'm going to call this approve FCR, and I'm going to save it. And straight away what it does is it adds a step in at the very end of the process. Now that's not where I want it. I actually want it to happen as the second step in the process, so I just drag it up there to the appropriate execution point, click on the step, and then I want to add in a question. A question is a piece of data. So I want to say, well, first of all, do you approve? And then I'm going to get an answer. Well, the answer is going to be a single line of text. That's just a piece of text. Well, I don't really want that. What I want is for the person to say yes or no. So let me change that type of question. Well, I could put in a choice question. And as you notice, when I select choice, it immediately gives me a box down here when I can enter choice values. I could type in yes or no. But you know what? I think there's something even easier than that if I go down here. Oh yeah, there's a yes, no question type. So that's great. So that's the answer I want to receive. I want to make it required, mandatory. You have to you have to make a choice, either yes or no. And I'm going to save that now. And that adds that piece of data in there. So it's really easy to add in steps and questions and change those. So as you press save here, the next time I run that process is going to have a step in there with that question. And I can pass that link out to my audience and they can actually go in and review what the change that you've made and give you feedback and say, okay, that works or that doesn't work. It needs to work this way. So they can basically come back to you very quickly and you can make changes and so on based on that. Now I'm just going to add in one more question here. and I'll keep my demonstration brief, but I'm just going to add in a multiple lines of text, and I'm going to call this a reason. So what I'm going to say now is I'm going to display a block of text where the person has to enter a reason, but I'm only going to display it if the person says no. Do you approve? No. Well, why? Okay, so I'm going to add in a business rule now. That's an automatic action, and that's going to display that question, but only if I say no. So that's called a hide show question rule. Put in a condition, and I'm going to say if the approve equals no, then I'm going to display that question. So let me pick the question there, reason, show. Okay, and that's a dynamic thing that's happening. As you enter data, this system is automatically running some processes, running some actions in the background that help you complete your work, help you complete your process, ensure that all the relevant detail is accurate and all the relevant detail is captured. So business rules can help you ensure that. Now we have lots of different business rules that allow you to integrate with backend systems that dynamically assign steps. So I can dynamically say, okay, well, I want to assign the site engineer approval to a person or a group, Paul Stone as it happens. So I can vary the assignments of the steps as I'm going through the workflow. And you notice that this business rule actually looks quite similar to the last one, and that's very deliberate. The whole idea is that if you want to train up somebody on designing a workflow, it's very easy. We have a 2-day training cycle on the entire system. So it's really easy to get trained up and get going on FlowForma. And that's just so important if you want to start the snowball rolling and get people to use the system. Now we have lots and lots of different automatic actions, like we can send emails and we can generate documents. So it's very interesting to see our document generation feature. So you can add in communications here to send emails, also to generate documents. And we use a template system. If you want to generate a document, all you have to do is create a template, and you do that in Microsoft Word. Here's an example of an integrated labor team request form that's using our Microsoft Word plugin that lets you access all those questions and merge in the answers into this template. And then it just automatically generates that form as a PDF, let's say, that's saved automatically in SharePoint. And we found it so important in construction that people, even though they're moving to electronic forms, they still want to have that file, that PDF, that they can file away that acts as evidence that they've done a certain job or completed a certain thing. Also, these PDFs that you generate, they can be attached to emails and automatically sent out to your client. And it's still important to have, as you're transitioning, if you like, onto an electronic form away from paper, it's important to have these electronic documents that actually look like the piece of paper you used to have in the past. So we find that this feature is very popular to our construction audience. Now, the system has many more features. One thing I would like to say is that as you move through those processes, all that data is captured and saved in your environment and available for reporting. So you can save all that information. Sorry, that information is automatically saved in your SharePoint environment and available for reporting. Also, you can see forms at various stages here. So I can see forms awaiting my input, and you can define these tiles and so on to actually show you forms at different stages, forms that are relevant to you and so on, so that you can quickly see your current workload. That's again so important because you can see forms that are at certain stages for periods of time. You can also send reminders and escalations when you exceed the time period for a particular process. So you can do all those sort of controls, and that's all because all that information is being held electronically. The system is constantly tracking your workflow. It knows how long a task has been waiting and so on, and it can carry out automated actions based on those time frames. So it helps you with project delays and whatever. Okay, so I think actually that's probably as much as I'd like to cover on a demonstration of FlowForma. We don't have a whole lot of time, but please, by all means, if you'd like to go onto our flowforma.com website, you can sign up for a demonstration, and we can give you a full demonstration of our product that shows you all of the features and how it's benefiting the construction community. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, for that demonstration. It's interesting to know that that field change request process took under an hour to develop. If anyone is interested in seeing the 1 hour demonstration of that field change request, you can find it at www.flowforma.com/construction demo. We'll now be moving on to the Q&A. So thank you for submitting all your questions, and we'll get through as many as we can in the time that we have left. So Chris, this first question has come in for you. So how did you get staff buy-in to use a digitization tool?
First of all, we found the key process owners, process champions, involved them with all the development process, so they knew exactly what was going on, and they could then tell their teams, tell people to be using the process, what we were going to be doing and what impact did it have on them. And then it just started growing from there, where departments took it upon themselves to build processes and deploy processes within their departments. So it just sort of grew like that, really. Just get people involved, get them included in the development process, get them constantly testing and using it so they know the product and they can sell it to their teams and stuff.
Thank you. And Paul, I think you'll be able to answer this next question best. So can you assign certain people outside of your organization a process step?
Oh yeah, you can. Using our FlowForma Engage feature, I was saying there a little earlier about the fact that you can get clients, suppliers, and so on involved in your process. They can be specific individuals. So you can actually say, okay, well, I want Paul Stone from FlowForma to carry out that approval. And you can assign specific steps in the process to specific resources. And those resources, just like I said, can be external. So, you know, it can be a client, a supplier, or even subcontractors who may not have access to your tenancy. So it means basically they don't have an account. They don't have an account that you have to manage. You don't want to manage. You don't want them to have access, but you do want to interact with them. So what we do is we provide this ability to you can for example say paulstone@gmail.com. He's going to carry out the approval, and then you can have that step completed by paulstone@gmail.com. So yeah, you can definitely you know, assign steps to external people. They're identified by their email address, and they're authenticated by a external authentication provider. Sorry to be a little bit technical, but like Google, if you sign into Google, the system recognizes that you're signed into Google and that you're assigned to a step, and that then you can go in and complete your work.
Perfect. We've just got time for one last question before we finish up. So Paula, I think you should take this one. So Paula, how did you decide what processes to prioritize for automation?
We looked at the most paper labor intensive. So the volume, which again, on some of these larger 5G projects, we've got multiple subcontractors and their crews doing the work. They each have to report their field production daily. And then the hands that it went through the subcontractor's hand, it went through the QA/QC person's hands, the construction manager and the project manager. So when we saw that it was like, okay, we've got paper and then we've got all these steps, it just made so much sense to us to go after those processes first. In turn, as Chris spoke to earlier, now we've got ride-out forms, we got health and safety forms on FlowForma. So it builds from there, because once you get the buy-in, then it's, well, can we do this or we can do that? But we looked at paper and labor intensity for the first processes that we picked.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you as well to all of our speakers. We have run out of time for questions, but we will be sending any unanswered questions to the speakers after the session, so don't worry if you haven't had a response back today. So again, thank you to all of our attendees as well for joining us in the audience today. So everyone will receive an on-demand copy of today's session via email in the coming days. And don't forget, you can also download the white paper, Why Digitization is No Longer an Option, from the resources section on your screen now. You can also sign up for a free 14-day trial of FlowForma at flowforma.com/trial, and you can book a one-to-one call with a FlowForma process expert. So our next webinar will take place on September 3rd at 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and this will include a panel discussion on how to maximize construction projects efficiency in the Australia infrastructure industry. You can sign up for this via our website. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, And please take the time to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen in a few moments. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.